Starting with a 2023 R3 release, we can now manage vendor setup approval process directly in Sage Intacct. This can ensure that the information entered on the vendor setup screen is correct and minimize or possibly eliminate duplication of records. Once vendor approval system is turned on, any new vendor record that is set up in a system will need to be submitted for approval before AP bills can be posted. This feature is turned on under Applications, Accounts Payable, Configuration. Look for Vendor Approval section, and here's a checkbox that will turn this feature on. Please note, the first time you turn this feature on, the system will need to set the status of all existing records to approved. This is done automatically and behind the scenes, but depending on the size of your vendor list, this process may take some time to complete. Therefore, it's recommended that you turn this feature on after hours. You can also turn email notifications sent to approvers that new vendors have been set up and waiting for approval. Once you turn on this feature and vendor records have been updated, you have to assign permission to access a particular area of the program, and that's done under Company, Admin, Roles, Edit your existing role, View subscriptions, look for Accounts Payable section, click on Permissions, and look for the option that says Approve Vendors. It's right there. By default, it would be unchecked. You would have to check this box, save it, and from this point on, user who turned on this feature would be able to make further changes to the system. So how does this feature work? Vendors can be set up in a system by users that have a permission to set up new vendors. However, with approval system being turned on, those users can only submit vendor record for approval. So we can see here on the list, on the top, 2 new vendors being created with the status submitted. At this time, new AP bills can be entered but cannot be posted before new vendor record is approved. So let's have a look. If you look at Accounts Payable, Bills, there's a draft of the invoice up on the top. The status is a draft, and system displays that vendor is in submitted state and transaction cannot be posted until vendor is approved. I can now change my login and log in as a user who has a permission to approve vendor records. Approvers can be notified via email that new vendor records have been set up. They would log onto the system, go to Accounts Payable, and approve vendor list. This will give them option to quickly access and approve vendors with or without comments posted for the approval process. If I log back into the system as AP Clerk, I can go to my AP Bills now, and we will see the change now. Invoice that was previously in draft state, still in draft, but this time, since vendor record has been approved, I would be able to post this invoice. Of course, further validation will happen at this time, so this invoice is missing location, which need to be assigned. And at this time, we should be able to post the record. So this was a quick review of Approve Vendor feature in Sage Intacct 2023 R3 release.
So one of the other enhancements in the new release is the purchase order matching tolerance. So in purchasing, in the configuration, there is an enable match tolerance checkbox you can now turn on. So what this does is it matches up the purchase order quantity and price with the vendor invoice or PO receipt and compares the quantity or the price or both, and make sure that the quantity on the invoice is within 1% of the purchase order or purchase order receipt, for example. Okay. So you can play with your tolerance percent right here in the configuration. Okay. So I've set up a 1% tolerance on the invoice and the PO receipt. So the purchase order can be converted directly to an invoice, or it goes purchase order, receipt, vendor invoice. So I've set up both in case the receipt is skipped. Okay. So just why that's like that. So over here in the purchase orders, I've got one here that I'm going to convert over to a receipt. So I'm going to convert here to a PO receipt. And my quantity is 1,050 cents. Okay, so my purchase order shows 1,050 cents for the price. So I'm going to post this and show you the normal way it'll treat it if I'm within tolerance, my 1%. Okay, so my PO receipt says state pending, and I look at it. There's no exception warning down here. Okay, and my state is pending. Okay, so now we're going to do it, and we're going to go out of the tolerance. So we're going to delete this, and we're going to do the purchase order again. Okay, so we're going to convert it to PO receipt. And this will work the same way if you do quantity or price tolerance outside of the 1%. Okay, so one or the other, it's going to give you a warning or an exception, a state. Okay. So if you go back in and look at it, if you hover over this exclamation mark, it's going to tell you what was outside the tolerance. Okay. So now let's say I want to get rid of that exception state and put it to a normal state. I'm going to hit override exception here. And now it's going to go back to that pending state. Okay. But let's say I want to make it be what really happened and not the 900. Let's say this was a mistake. Someone put in 900, but really received 1,000. Then you can come back in here and edit it and change it to match the PO. Okay. So depending on permissions you've set up in your company, you can have someone override the exception warning or not. And you can also turn on being able to edit the PO receipt and such. So if you want to put controls in place, you may want to play with the permissions and the roles in the users with that override exception being able to be used on their profile or not. So also, I just wanted to point out, you can, let's say this said 900, but I want to go look at the PO. You can do it right here and still stay on that same screen and see, okay, it was 1,000. Do some research by just drilling into the actual PO from the receipt, okay, and vice versa. So just wanted to point that out there too. So same process or same thing will happen if my price was 10% different. I won't show that, but it'll do the same thing with the exception state and that warning on that screen. Okay. And that's how the PO matching tolerance works in the new release.
Okay, so the next area we're going to take a look at is the enhancements to lists and additional options you have with playing around and testing out the new beta list that they have in the system. In the past, they had just had it available with the vendor record. They've expanded it in a couple more areas and have also expanded what can be done within that. So in any case, whenever you want more information on one of the releases that are coming up, if you go to your home page, you can say read the 2023 R3 release notes. That should be there already. And the first thing we're going to talk about today is down in user experiences. And we're going to click on list enhancements. And in here, this is what we're going to show you first, basically where you have an opportunity to test out the new features in these lists throughout the system. So you can see in here exactly where you can go play with these. The two main areas are going to be on the vendor record and the attachment records as well. So that's what we're going to focus on today. So I'm going to go into my preview instance of release 3, and I'm going to click over to the vendor area under accounts payable and get a vendor list. So traditionally, when you're in here, this is, excuse me, let me turn this off. I had it on, but this is typically how your list looks now in the system. If you want to filter on vendor name INT, it just shows you all the vendors where INT is in the beginning of the name. In order to show it throughout the name, you have to use the % sign and say INT. And then it will show you the vendors where INT is somewhere in that name. Okay, so that just kind of gives you an idea of what it looks like today. If you want to create your own views, you actually have to come in over to here and say create new view. And then you have to go through a wizard and build that view. Okay, so some of the big improvements they have here is that anytime you can come into your system and over in the top right, you'll see this turn on list beta interface. You can put your mouse over there and you'll get a little explanation about it in here as well. But to turn it on, you simply have to click on that turn on button here, and it's going to change the view of what your list look like. And again, it's not everywhere in the system, but it is under vendors and attachments. And now you have a more interactive visual view here for you to use. You can customize the columns very easily. You can move back and forth, make them bigger, make them smaller, and you can change the order. So if I want the vendor name first, I can drag it over and I can change my order. Okay, so you can do all of that interactively on the fly instead of going through the wizard. Okay, so for example, I might want to make my vendor list small. So the other things you can do with the columns is you can sort them. You can turn on text wrapping. So if you want to have a smaller column here but have it wrap, you can do that. And you can freeze columns. So if you have a wider list here, and when you're scrolling back and forth, you don't want the vendor name to go away, you can freeze that vendor name on that list here. Okay, so you can do that as well. I'm going to turn that off. And then you'll notice on the search capabilities, it kind of says in light gray here, contains. So what you can do now is if I want to do a search on a vendor, I can say INT, and now it's going to do that contains anywhere in. You don't have to actually put the % sign anymore. So that's a nice little enhancement as well. And what you can do here is if you want to filter on a particular field, like let's say city, I want to filter on, I hit the little filter button here. I got a filter where not just equals or contains, but also not equal to, starts with, ends with, or is blank. So in this case, just show me the vendors where the city is blank, click apply, and there's my list. And now what I could do is I could manage that view and just say save as. So I can click on that. I can call it missing information. Click save. And now that view becomes available for you to go back and forth. So if you want to, see all vendors, you just click all. If you want to go to your missing information, you can click on that. One of the nice features here also is a split screen. So you'll see this right here with this, I'm covering it up here, the split view. You can click on that and that will open up the split view and it will show you the vendor that you are on that row. So if I click on state of Iowa, it's going to flip and show me the vendor setup for state of Iowa. So you can get to that by this button here, but you can also click on the vendor, state of Iowa, and it will do the same thing. And now I can switch over to edit and I can edit that vendor and put the city in right there. Okay, and you can fill that city in. Okay, then you can save it. And I don't have terms set up in the vendor. So I'm going to go back in and add some vendor terms. I must have a smart rule on for vendor terms, net 30. Okay, submit that. And there you go. And now that vendor is magically off my list. Okay, so you can edit pretty successfully with that. Some of the other things you can do is, let's go back to my all here. Sometimes you might want to do it off of total due. So you might want to say total due is greater than or equal to. So I just want to see vendors who we owe more than 10,000 to. Click apply. Notice it builds that advanced filtering right here. If I click on it, you can see all the filtering that's in there right now, and you can keep adding to it. And you can do ORs as well. And now it's just showing me vendors that we owe more than 10,000. And I'm going to sort that by highest to lowest here. And then I might have another view, save as, called, how about the greater sign, greater than 10,000. Code. Okay. So these views are going to become very helpful in your day-to-day operations. You can have as many of these as you want. They could be on your menu, on your dashboards from there as well. So basically you can do that. You can configure your columns here. You can configure your sort, and that takes you into that where you can check off which columns you want to be available for this list right from within there. You don't have to no longer go to the wizard to do that. So it's a much improvement into the system here as well. Maybe we want the fax number or email address. You can apply that. Okay, and that would add it to that field. So the vendor lists are here under beta. Whenever you want to turn it off, you just click turn off beta, and it'll turn it off. When you turn it back on, all of the items you've set up already will still be there for you to play with and test. And one of the things we would recommend is go ahead and give them some feedback on this. There's a send us feedbacks icon here. They do listen. Go ahead and fill that out, feed it, and give them some feedback. So the other area would be over in attachments, where it's pretty helpful. So if you have a lot of attachments in your system, if I want to say all my attachments, so there's a ton of attachments in here, I want to do some better filtering and views for the attachments in the system, I can turn on the list here, the beta list here for the enhancements by clicking on that. And then once you're in attachments, same type of thing that we did earlier, the split screen comes in nice and handy here. So now I can go down and take a look at my payroll report descriptions. I have a PDF file here. It's a guide in the guide folder. I can click on that and open up the PDF if I want to. So you can scroll down that list. And then what you may want to do, and I think I have one already in your views here, for example, I have a view that just shows me all the attachments for a particular folder. So if you have documentation, guides, legal documents, however you want to filter these folders out, you can just make these views here. And then now I can say, just show me all my user guides. And there's my user guides. And I can click on it here and it'll take me to the document. Okay, so go ahead and play around with these lists. They're in there. Once the release 3 comes out, you can turn them on and off. You can provide feedback and you can use them. If you like them, keep them on and use them. They're there for you to use. The next area we're going to talk about pretty briefly is over in the projects area. They've added some more options and visual view of the budget area and summary area on the project setup. So over in projects, if I go over to projects and I'm going to look at my private, I want to pick one of my projects I have. I want to take a look at the San Antonio project. So I'm going to click Editor View. And in here, under the Project Summary tab, you'll see some different information here. You know, what's the primary budget? And you can see if there's multiple costs or across multiple entities. You can see them broken out by entity here. This is the screen that you've traditionally had in this area where it gave you an overview of your budget information. But now they've added some more data options here, some totals. Now you can see total hours by project right here on this tab. And you can also see costs. All of your payroll, accounts payable, and purchase order costs right here on a total level. So it's not one of the bigger enhancements, but it's a nice little feature to allow you to see some status reporting right within here. If you want to get to your budget, you can click on your budget and run a budget report right from here as well. Okay, so that's another option in the system. The next section we'll talk about is regarding reporting. So they've come out with some new reporting options. New reporting fields are areas that you can now take advantage of in the system. And before I get into that on the construction side, one of the things that I wanted to mention that is actually out already today is the new group of construction payroll reports that come with the system now. As a payroll construction specific report, they do have to be uploaded up as a package. But in case you weren't aware of it, there are payroll reported packages updates that are out there now. And if you don't have those loaded up, please reach out, contact us. We can assist you in that. But typically, if you have the payroll module, we would upload that for you. But if you're using a different partner and they haven't done that, basically the way to know if you have them loaded up in the system is, and again, this is if you actually have subscribed and are used the payroll construction payroll module in your suite of applications. If you go over to platform services at the top level and go to custom packages, you should see a package called construction payroll report package 2. And make sure I got a report in here too. And there might be another page. So you can see in this case here, I have construction report package 4. So that's one other thing to make sure you have. But then there's construction payroll report package 1. And if I don't have that, what I would do is in this case, I'm going to actually go and load that up for you. We can do it here. It's pretty easy to do. This is what Sage has available for us on the knowledge base. Basically, construction payroll report package 2. I can import that. Takes a second. And now they'll be available to you. So what you can do is once this is done, you can go over to your ICRW report area. So go to reports, interactive custom reports, and you should see these types of reports listed in your system. So you'll see you have all these payroll reports. They're listed with the CRE after them. They have come out with a huge bold package of construction payroll reports, workers' comp, union reports, check activity details, labor distribution by projects. It's all there for you. They can all be edited and tweaked and copied over. So that is available now. Reach out if you have payroll but don't see these. So the other thing that's coming out with release 3 is a whole new reporting area in the system for construction. So before release 3, if you wanted to kind of get different types of cost reporting all in one place, for example, you wanted to see your estimated cost, your actual cost, your committed cost, billings, contracts, amounts, all that stuff, it's still a very, very good way to do it. Under financial reports, you can run all that together, but it's all technically going through the general ledger. So what they've come out with is a new reporting area called construction reporting. This sends over every document related to construction in the life cycle of the project. So all of your billings, all of your purchase orders, your estimate, your costs, your payments, all of that comes in one area. For those that are coming from a legacy system like Sage 300 CRE, which would be the Timberline product, this would be equivalent, in my eyes, to what was the job cost transaction file. So in there, you could see all the types of transactions, and you could filter them out by what's called a type, a transaction type, or in this case, a document. So what we'll do here is we'll go into reports, and we're ultimately going to end up over in the ICRW, the Interactive Custom Reports area. But I'm going to show you the data in the custom report wizard because obviously it shows a little simpler and visual here for you guys to see what we're talking about. Now, for time purposes, I did create one already called Project Transactions Report. We'll jump into there ultimately, but right now I'm going to go and actually create one from scratch. So I'm going to click on Add here, and the primary data source is where you'll see this new record. So, one of the first decisions in a custom report is where do I want to start? Where do I want to start getting the data from? Which field? AP bill, timesheets report. So traditionally you'd have some, project transactions under AP bill. You'd have some under purchase orders. You'd have some under AR invoice. Well, now if you scroll down far enough, you have one area called construction reporting. So you want to look for that. Usually it's alphabetical. Just keep an eye out for it. It may not be alphabetical, but in this case it is. Construction reporting. Once I select that, I can click next here, And now it shows me the fields that are available. So what this does is create a transaction line for every document related to the project. So you can see here I can get things like GL account number, amount. Is this transaction billable for a time and material? Has it been billed? What's the cost type? What's the category? The material labor sub? Who's the customer? Things like document type, which is a big field here. So this would be like estimate transaction or AP bill. Okay, things like that you can get at now. And not only that, transaction date would be another big one, unit cost. So you can pick the fields you need, but also expand on any dimension in the system. So I can come in here and say, well, I want the vendor name as well, because I don't know the IDs. So I can come into here and I can find the vendor name and I can add that as well. I think that's under vendor name here. Yep, vendor name right there. And then you have drill down capabilities if you select a field with the arrow, like you normally would have. So I just wanted to show you this because this shows a good visual of how you can expand on that and see all the information on the project. Okay. So let's go back to the list, and instead of going through every step in the wizard, let's go right into this report that I already created, the project transactions report. And I'll click edit here. And in here, I have the ability, just like we did earlier, where I went next here and I selected the fields that I wanted on the report. Typical custom report steps here. And I'll just next through this a little bit just to give you an idea. You can have columns. What order do you want the columns in? Which columns are, which columns do you want to sum or average out? And then you just keep going. How do you want to group it, sort it, etc. Okay, so you would do that based on a traditional, however you would normally build a custom report. And then to run it, we go to the second page here. Now we can get all that information in one report. And I went to the wrong page. Sorry about that. So if I go into BCS project transaction report, I can click run over here. And what you'll see is I'll have a place to filter it. I can say, just show me transactions for San Antonio. And do I want to make it portrait or landscape? Show details or not? But if I just click view, now you can see the way I built this was I sorted it by transaction type. So for this project, I want to see all my AP bills first, and then my AP payments and journal entries and estimates, and you can get totals for all of this information. But this is every transaction related to the project. Current budget, your current estimate, and you can filter and sort these to be specific by column. So you might just have one column might be your estimated cost, another column might be your actual cost. All of that is capable now with this new data area. And the best way to show you that is really to take a look at the ICRW area, because that's where you're going to really fully utilize this new structure. So again, just like the custom reports, I created one already called project transactions. If we click edit, sorry about that. Let me refresh that as well here. Oh, I know, I did it I'm in the wrong data folder. Let's go into reports, interactive custom reports. And I think I called it BCS project transaction. So if we go into here under edit, now you can see that same data structure that we looked at on the custom report. And, it's broken out a little bit differently in an ICRW design, but once this opens up here, we'll show you that. And then, you can be a little more creative and visually appealing in the ICRW area. So there's that construction reporting folder, that new folder. And inside here, I can expand this. And now all those fields that we saw on the top in the other report, in the custom reports, is right here. So I can make this bigger if I want to. And basically open that up here. Not cooperating with me. Okay, there it goes. So, as you can see here, you have the attributes, which are going to be, the fields in the top record, the document type, the areas that we saw earlier. And then you have those dimensions like we saw on the bottom where you can expand and add them to the report. So, this is kind of what I did here in this report was I put the project on top and then I sorted it by transaction type. So here's all the AP bill transactions for that project. And then you get a subtotal AP payments. You could put filters on here. So I put some prompts in the system so that I can prompt me for the project and the transaction type. So the end results can look like this. And again, this is just one quick example of how to use this data. There's just so much more we can now do with this reporting and we'll be doing in this reporting as we go forward now. So if I come over to here and take a look at that BCS projects transaction report and click run, it's very flexible. So I can either have those as separate columns, like a WIP report, where you have cost, billings, projections, or you can have them like this, where you say, I just want to see for this project, this type of transaction. So you just want to see your estimate, your original estimate. Click done, click view. And then you'll see, project, you don't have original estimate for that one. I picked a bad job. So let's go back here and try that again. So I'm in here. Let's go into PCS. It is important that you have data in the system. So we'll come into here and say, let's do this one. And that should be good. And let's do AP bill. See if we have any AP bills in here. Do a print preview. And then here you go. So for this project, there's all the AP bills, there's the total, there's the vendors. You could turn on drill downs and things like that as well. But now we can get that all in one area with this new reporting area called construction reporting. So definitely take a look at that. Reach out to us. We do have training and videos on report designing and ICRW and custom reports, along with the financial reporting. We can help you get trained on how to do them yourself or do some for you as well. But definitely some exciting times with data here in the system.
Now we're going to cover vendor compliance in the new release. This is the first version of vendor compliance. More will come out on compliance in future releases. So first, to turn on compliance, you're going to need to go into your company subscriptions and scroll down to the bottom and toggle the vendor compliance on. If you have construction subscription, this is included in the cost. So we're also going to go over to our compliance definitions in purchasing and set those up in the system. Okay. So we're going to come in here and we're going to look at some that are already set up. We've got insurance type in the category here, and you've got a miscellaneous type. Okay, so I've set up a general insurance definition ID and told it to validate against an expiration date, not the fact that I've obtained a document. So there's two different ways to validate. Okay, so when you log the receipt of this compliance item, you're going to have a date field to log or the fact that you've just received it with a checkbox. So this definition is using the expiration date field on that screen. Okay, so I'll show you that in a minute. And then also, if you're out of compliance, what do you want it to? Do you want it to have an error and stop you from being able to pay accounts payable payments for that specific vendor? Do you want it to warn you or do you want it to ignore? So the compliance definitions are set up first, and then you go in and you set up your compliance types. Okay. So the license here is another compliance definition that has the miscellaneous category here. And you have a document received validation against this one. and we're going to say, give us an error and not let us process through when we do the accounts payable for that specific vendor. So just a couple of differences there on compliance definitions. So on your compliance types, you can have a couple different compliance types roll up into a compliance definition. So if I've got a business license compliance definition that blocks payments if I don't have the document received. So this definition tells the system what to do. So I can actually make my business license and my specialty contractor license use the same compliance definition. I created a new business license compliance type, and I can pick the fact that this is the license compliance definition, okay, that I just showed. So on my specialty one, I also have this picked as license, which I'll show in a second, okay? In your compliance types, you're also going to tell it how to number it. So each time you log a business license, how is the numbering going to look? Well, I just use license as a prefix, LIC, a dash, and a number. So the system is numbering it for me based on this sample value that's shown down here. So if we go look at the specialty contractor license compliance type, I'm using the same definition. So it's going to block my AP payments from happening. I'm also using the same record ID numbering sequence, okay, the LIC for license, okay? So just wanted to point out the compliance definitions and compliance types. So you set those both up in the system before you start logging the compliance records, okay? So over in the purchasing area, we have the compliance records under the All tab, where you're going to log your compliance records. Okay, so here's some that I've already set up. So for example, business license here. So when I add a new one, I'm going to pick the compliance type ID as a business license. It's going to default in some information for me up here, and I'm going to pick my vendor. Okay, I'm going to say it's received, and I'm going to give it the date that it received, and that I was the one who logged it. So once you're done clicking this document received box for this specific compliance definition, all it needs is this checkbox. It doesn't need any of the other dates. That's for the insurance compliance definition. So remember, we set that up to say just validate it against the document received checkbox. So my license here validates against document received. Okay. So let's go look at the insurance one of these here. And you can see that I've got some dates filled in here. I've also checkmarked that, just to show that it's received. It doesn't hurt anything. But if you look at the insurance compliance definition, it's going to validate against the expiration date right there. Okay. So long as my expiration date is past today's date or equal to today's date, I'm not going to get a warning on the pay bills screen. So let's look at a couple that are in the system here with the expiration dates. So here's one that's expired on vendor V00001. You've got vendor 3 here that is not expired. Okay, so let's go look at the pay bills screen and refresh this and see what this looks like now. So vendor 1 has a warning. So that's what I've set up in that definition to say, hey, I'm past July 31st now, because today is August 9th. So over here, it's giving me a warning on my pay bill screen on that vendor each time. So if I sort by vendor, if I looked at all the vendors in here for Lowe's, it's going to have the warning next to that each time. Okay. So you still can get through it. You still can pay it, but it's going to give you a warning over here. If it said error, then it will not let you process through. That will stop you from paying. Okay. Just a quick rundown on how compliance works in the system with this release for the initial compliance rollout. Okay, like I said, there's going to be more coming in future releases.
When new features are released in Sage Intacct, or in some cases when existing features have been updated, your system admin is responsible for updating user permissions to reflect these changes for applicable user roles or users. Permissions for new features are undefined by default, so access and permissions will need to be assigned. Since your company permissions can be set up to be either user-based or role-based, your system admin will need to adjust them accordingly. The following are new features and feature changes in 2023 R3 that will need to be assigned. So let's review those changes. Let's go to Company, Admin, Roles, and let's review subscriptions for administrator role. The first change happened in a cash management module. Existing feature that was previously called Bank Transaction Imports, it's now called Bank Transactions for API and Import. New list item has been added. Also, ability to edit transactions for the bank has been added to the list. So those two items will need to be checked in order to utilize those two features. The next one is an accounts payable feature. It's called Approve Vendors. A whole new area of the program has been opened now. New functionality to set up vendors through approval process has been turned on, and in order for user to be able to approve vendors that are set up with submitted status, this checkbox would need to be turned on. The next section is purchasing. There's a whole new section added to the purchasing module. For compliance, it's divided in two areas: compliance setup and compliance records, with 5 new security items that need to be checked in order to access this particular functionality. Also, it's worth mentioning that you can always click on All Radio button for both functions and reports and click on Save in order to ensure that all checkboxes that may have been possibly missed from before are checked. And lastly, there's a new feature added to Time and Expenses module. Now we have ability to issue bank file for employee expenses. You'll see a new area called Bank File Generator and a bank file. The first one enables us to run a bank file, and the other one enables us to manage those files created within Time and Expenses. Again, we can check All Radio button in order to check all missing checkboxes. Click on Save and exit the screen. So this was our quick review of changes to permissions in order to enable access and full functionality of newly released features in 2023 R3.
Okay, now we're going to talk about a feature that they've added to the inter-entity bill-back templates in Sage Intacct. So real quick, what a inter-entity bill-back is it's a transaction that a template you can create between two entities that will automatically record, for example, rental income on one entity and rental expense on another. Okay. So if you set up a bill-back template in the accounts receivable area and then create an accounts receivable invoice to that inter-entity customer, it's going to create the automatic accounts payable bill on the other side. So the bill number now, the new feature for this release, the bill number now is here so you can drill over to it. Okay, so if I click this here, it's going to take me into the screen that records the accounts payable bill for the Timberline development vendor to record that rent expense for the inter-entity transaction. Okay, and vice versa on the inter-entity bill, if I wanted to drill back to the AR invoice, the link is here as well to drill back to the inter-entity invoice.
There's a new feature now available for companies using multi-entity system, and its ability to restrict access to the general ledger transactions to the entity level only. Let's review it. Let's go to Company, Admin, Subscriptions. Let's find Multi-Entity Management feature on the list and click on Configure. Let's review Entity Settings area, and a new feature for restrictions is right here in the middle of the screen. This feature, restrict general ledger transactions to the entity level only, works in conjunction with restriction to subledger transaction to the entity level only. Conversely, this feature can be set up to allow access or restrict access to the top level only. Those two options are mutually exclusive. Before restricting transactions to the entity level, please make sure that all transactions in a GL are approved and posted. Also make sure that any recurring journal entries that are set up to post to the top level are changed to post to the entity level. Otherwise, they will not work anymore. If transactions are restricted to the entity level, you can still see them, view them from the top level, but you will not be able to edit or post them from there. Also, please note that there seems to be a restriction where this feature can be used. If I'm saving this change, I'll get an error message stating that this feature is not compatible with construction payroll and vendor compliance module. Let's take the opportunity to also review new Sage Intacct glossary. If you're looking for particular terms and meaning of those terms in Sage Intacct, new feature has been added to Help Center. So if you go to Help and Support, top right-hand corner, Help Center, Basics, Glossary, and look particular string, the system will find closest match. So this was our quick review of new feature on how to restrict GL entry to the entity level only, and quick review of new glossary feature under Help Center.
That's it for the release notes for the enhancements for R3 for Sage Intacct 2023. I hope you found it useful, and please subscribe, like, comment. Feel free to reach out to us with any questions, and we look forward to getting out some more videos for you in the future. Thank you.